Hey there fellow Planeswalkers, it's Steve for Collector Mania, and today we are continuing on with our Alternate Tuesday series. Today we're actually going to take a look at EDH, so Elder Dragon Highlander. If you do not know, EDH is actually the original Commander format. It is basically the same as Commander, except for you do not have a legendary creature in your command zone to play from, essentially. So the deck is essentially just a 100-card singleton mashup of whatever you want it to be. It's a pretty interesting format. I have only played a handful of games so far, and this actually may be my first in actual life paper, EDH deck that I'll build at some point. I've been putting it together for I don't know how many years, ever since Oath of the Gatewatch finally dropped and released the rest of the Eldrazi. But I don't know, it just seems like something that's so much fun. 5-color colorless. Just think about that concept. It's just kind of interesting and bizarre, which is exactly what I want to do, while building a deck like this. So with that, let's go ahead and break into the deck list here. We're going to start with our creatures. So first up, we've got an Endless one. Then we've got a Fathom Feeder, a little bit of Ingest, and Death Touch. Forerunner of Slaughter. I found that this guy is really important in Commander, or like Commander variants of this. Really, really important. Then we've got a Nest Invader. Catacomb Sifter. Having something when it dies be able to scry is actually pretty important. It's pretty powerful to kind of stack the top of your deck. Eldrazi Displacer. So you wouldn't think there would be a whole lot of targets for this in this deck, but there actually is. There's a lot of little Eldrazi that enter and give you like little tokens, so on and so forth. And there's even some bigger Eldrazi that do some pretty interesting things for you. Of course, keep in mind that a lot of our really, really big triggers are on cast, so this guy will not work for those, but he's definitely worth running in the list. I've got an Eldrazi Sky Spawner, Flare Drone, so we hope to abuse this guy quite a bit. Just keep putting other colorless creatures into play and then having target opponent lose 1 life could be pretty important. We've got a Herald of Kozilek, really important for reducing the cost of our creatures. Matter Reshaper, Nettle Drone, could be a lot of fun since it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Vile Redeemer, a great way to recover after a board wipe. Void Grafter, a little bit of protection. Wasteland Strangler, some pretty limited removal. It's okay, it's decent, especially in the early game, but don't look to really remove anything too important with this guy. Duststalker, Kozilek's Predator. Sifter of Skulls, another great way to recover. If a lot of your creatures are being destroyed left and right, just getting tokens sometimes is really important. Smothering Abomination, a little bit of card draw. Thought-Knot Sayer, of course, a Eldrazi menace in pretty much every format that's played in, and it's still pretty powerful in multiplayer formats. Ulamog's Nullifier. I have yet to actually use this guy. As soon as I saw this card, I got super excited. It's really hard to cast. Hopefully we have enough of the ingest kind of thing going on where we can actually put those cards into exile on opponents and then be able to bring them back to their graveyard to activate this guy's ability. I don't know, really interesting card. Love quirky cards like this. Barrage Tyrant, Blight Herder, Brood Butcher, another one of my favorites, really. Being able to sacrifice just a drone and give something -2/-2 could be really important, especially in combat, so on and so forth. Pretty cool creature. Emrakul's Hatcher, Kozilek's Channeler. We do have quite a few really high cost Eldrazi, of course, in here, and this guy definitely helps out, especially with the colorless. Reality Smasher, Conduit of Ruin, another one of my favorites. Having the first creature spell you cast each turn cost 2 colorless less is really important, plus it's got a tutor effect on it, so that can't really be beat. Deep Fathom Skulker, a little bit more card draw. Drowner of Hope, Endbringer, another one of my favorites. This is essentially a Staff of an End for Eldrazi. Rapacious one. This, if you have not played with this card, it is actually really, really cool. My friend Seth actually showed it to me years and years ago. It's really interesting being able to get Eldrazi spawn equal to the amount of damage this thing does, so that's really, really cool. Sire of Stagnation, Deceiver of Form, Dread Defiler, another one of those cards that I've always wanted to try out, and I think that being in a mono Eldrazi kind of deck theme, this actually works out really well. World Breaker, Elder Deep Fiend, Artisan of Kozilek, one of the older but really powerful ones. Void Winnower, one of the most important pieces to this deck in my opinion. If you're not running this card in pretty much any big kind of creature deck, you really should think about it. This actually shuts down a lot if you really look at it. I mean, all of a sudden your opponent can't cast even spells, so that's Wrath of God, that's Supreme Verdict, that's a lot of board wipes. I mean, they can't really deal with your massive board at that point. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, great way to draw cards and have a little bit of Annihilator. Kozilek, the Great Distortion, oh, probably one of my favorite cards of all time. This card is just so good. There was a little bit of worry when I started putting the list together just to have that double diamond, but actually the list works out just fine, as you'll see when we get to the mana. Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, yeah, really good removal, really good creature. It That Betrays, this is just oppressive as heck. Especially if you have a few creatures out that have Annihilator, you just start swinging at somebody and basically gaining control of all their permanents. Emrakul, the Promised End. So this is our very top end of our creatures here. So of course this thing is a beast. I mean, if you haven't played with this card yet or against this card yet, it is ridiculously amazing. I didn't think, you know, when I first read it, when it came out in Shadows over Innistrad, Shadows over Innistrad, that it was going to be that powerful in multiplayer, but it actually ended up being one of the best effects that I've ever found to play, especially late game. Really powerful. Okay, so with that, we're going to break into our artifacts. We've got a Soul Ring, of course, Golgari Signet, Gruul Signet, Simic Signet, and we've got a Chromatic Lantern, and then an Eldrazi Monument. So really important. Once again, just give your entire team flying and indestructible. You can probably win the game at that point, so this just comes down. And then usually if it has to stick around for a little while, you can start sacrificing your little drones and whatnot, and it won't really matter to you. Then we're moving on to our enchantments. We've got an Awakening Zone, of course, a little bit of a way to gain a little bit of a ramp effect to cast our bigger Eldrazi. We've got a From Beyond, a great way to, once again, have a little bit of ramp and also be able to search our library for Eldrazi. That's really important. Then we've got our instant speed spells, so we've got a Cyclonic Rift, Heroic Intervention, Warping Whale, Anguish Unmaking, Crow's Grip, Not of This World, which has saved me quite a few times, especially in my Kozilek deck. Just being able to cast this thing for free and protect whatever, you know, from Swords to Plowshares is pretty important. Then we're moving on to our sorceries here. We've got a Rampant Growth, a Coax from the Blind Eternities. I anticipate quite a few of our Eldrazi getting exiled at some point, so having something like this to grab them back is pretty cool. Cultivate, Growth Spasm, Explosive Vegetation, All Is Dust, the best board wipe for this deck, I would say. It hits 0 of our creatures and I don't think really any of our permanents besides our enchantments, so that's a pretty good one-sided board wipe in my opinion. Now we're breaking into our lands. So 5-color mana bases are always kind of tricky. I tend to go a little bit more towards like base it on green and then move out from there. So essentially green is always going to be one of the, I guess, most prolific colors in like a 5-color mana base for me, and that's just the way I build. But really, you just have to play around with it for a little bit. I've built maybe 3 or 4 5-color decks at this point, and I've had pretty good success with the mana bases, especially, like I said, basing it off green. So just give it a shot, I would say. So first up, Blood Crypt, Breeding Pool, Brushland. These are super important, the Pain lands actually. Just being able to tap for that diamond mana when you need to is pretty important. Then we've got Cavern of Souls, of course we're going tribal here. Corrupted Crossroads, Eldrazi Temple, Eye of Ugin, Hollowed Fountain, Llanowar Wastes, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Overgrown Tomb, Sanctum of Ugin, Scalding Tarn, Shivan Reef, Steam Vents, Stomping Ground, Temple Garden, Underground River, Verdant Catacombs, Watery Grave, Wooded Foothills, Yavimaya Coast, and I believe we're on to our basics. So we've got 2 plains, 3 islands, 3 swamps, 2 mountains, 3 forests, and 1 waste. Anyway, with that, that is my list for the Eldrazi Tide. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to potentially at one point putting this together in paper. I don't know if it'll ever actually happen. There's not really that much of a call for regular EDH at my game store, and really most of the time people would rather just throw their commander into their deck and then just play it that way instead of building an entire EDH deck. I have kind of played around with the idea of just swapping one of these Eldrazi out and then making like something like Joda my commander, because he actually lets me cast my giant Eldrazi at a reduced cost while still having their abilities because they are cast. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, as always, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and we will see you guys next week.